Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and as readers, sometimes we're in the mood for a book that we can breeze through in a weekend, whereas there are other times where we just want to lock the door and get lost in an epic world until we hear a bang at the door and realize it's October and our families have filed a missing persons report. Well, wherever you are on that spectrum, I have a recommendation for you today, as I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite sci-fi books that are between 100 and 200 pages, all the way up to over 800 pages. And I didn't pick any that are under 100 pages because that's more short story territory, and I'm going to make a video on sci-fi short stories in the future. So let's get into some of my favorite sci-fi books, starting with books that are between 100 and 200 pages. And my three top picks for these shorter sci-fi books are The Futurological Congress, the trippy and satirical book by Stanislav Lem, The End of Eternity, a sharp time travel story from Isaac Asimov, and More Than Human, a poetic and philosophical book by Theodore Sturgeon. More Than Human is a book about some characters that have both disabilities as well as supernatural abilities. And the book is written in 3 parts, and the reading experience of this book entails figuring out how these 3 parts connect together, how these characters are connected, and also how we as a human species are all connected. It's a high concept book that I think is pulled off masterfully with some beautifully written prose. And just before we get to our next category, I know that the page length of a book can vary depending on the edition that you have, so I tried to do my best when picking the categories just based on the edition that I had, as well as the default answers that came up on Goodreads or Google, etc. But the edition you have may bump it up or down a category one way or the other, but it doesn't really matter in the end. Either way, I recommend all of these books. Moving on, we have some still relatively quick reads between 200 and 300 pages. And my top picks were The Carpet Makers by Andreas Eschbach, a dying Earth meets space opera story told through a series of interconnected stories. Solaris, the atmospheric and philosophical first contact story from Stanislav Lem. And number 1, Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, a book which attempts to find humans' place in relation to aliens as well as the rest of the universe. Childhood End starts with a number of alien spaceships arriving and hovering over a number of major cities around Earth. Where did they come from and why are they here? This is another book that was written in 3 parts, a popular structure at the time in the 1950s. And each part in this book just expanded my mind more and more. I loved how it took a look at humanity, both in terms of its history as well as projecting into the future. It had this incredible ability to make me feel incredibly small in comparison to the sheer vastness of the universe, and yet also managed to still have a profound and personal effect on me. Arthur C. Clarke is one of my favorite writers, and I think for me, Childhood's End is his best. Editing Jonathan here. I forgot to mention that at the end of the video, I'll be spinning the quantum wheel in order to find out the patron pick of the month. So stick around to the end of the video to see which sci-fi book I'll be adding to my schedule for July. Moving on to sci-fi books between 300 and 400 pages, my top picks included Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which features military tactics, interesting characters, and some deeper philosophy. Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, which is somehow both ridiculously absurd as well as incredibly poignant. And number 1, Permutation City by Greg Egan, the hard sci-fi book about virtual reality that blew my mind almost every single chapter. Permutation City tells the story of a character trying to find eternal life through virtual reality. And this book is pretty far towards the hard end of the hard sci-fi spectrum, as it explores all kinds of ideas to do with biology, physics, computing, and even the laws, the fundamental laws that make up the nature of our universe. And while this might put some of you off, I think if you can stand even just a little bit of hard sci-fi, please give it a chance, because the ideas in this book are just mind-boggling, and it pairs that with some pretty interesting characters and a very engaging story. Now, all of the categories in today's video feature some of my favorite books, but I think the 300 to 400 page category might be the strongest. There were a lot of 5-star books from me to choose from, and these top 3 are all 10 out of 10. So I don't know what else I have to say to convince you how much I like Permutation City. Just give it a try. Moving on to sci-fi books between 400 and 500 pages, and this is where you might notice a little bit of a shift in the trend where the shorter books tended to be more classic, whereas now we're going to see some more modern books start to creep in. And my top 3 picks were Blind Sight by Peter Watts, where hard sci-fi meets cosmic horror in this first contact story. Spin by Robert Charles Wilson, a sense of wonder sci-fi book where one day all the stars disappear. And in first place, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, a MacGyver in space type story with the perfect blend of hard sci-fi and humor. Project Hail Mary comes from the same author as The Martian, and in it we follow the story of a character that wakes up on a space mission with amnesia, and he needs to put the puzzle pieces together of how exactly he got here and what has gone wrong on this mission. Andy Weir does a great job of upping the stakes, presenting problems, and then using maths and physics in order to try and solve those problems. This book also features some really fun and witty dialogue and some great character dynamics. I'm really looking forward to the film that is coming out next year. Alright, it's time to put a little bit more meat on the bone, or should I say pages on the spine, with sci-fi books between 500 and 600 pages. And my top 3 picks were The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu, the second book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, a hard sci-fi first contact story. The Fall of Hyperion, also a sequel, the second book in the Hyperion Cantos, a genre-blending space opera. And number 1, House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds, a space opera that takes place millions of years in the future. In House of Suns, Abigail Gentian creates 1,000 clones and sends them out across the universe. Every 200,000 years later, they meet up for a reunion until around their 30th reunion, 6 million years in the future, this group of clones, known as the Gentian line, is attacked, but by whom and why? This is just a nutty premise for a book, and I liked the hard sci-fi elements, I liked the time travel and space travel elements, and I also really liked the fact that a lot of the characters were clones, so they were very similar in personality, but there were just little differences based on the different experiences that they had had through their thousands of years of travel. I remember reading this and my wife asking if I was enjoying my book, to which I responded, I think this might be the best book. This is one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Next up, we have sci-fi books between 600 and 700 pages. And here are my top 3. Demon by Daniel Suarez, the first book in a cyberpunk techno-thriller duology. Redemption Arc, the second book in the Revelation Space series, another epic space opera from Alastair Reynolds. And number 1, Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, aka Spiders in Space. Children of Time follows 2 storylines, one of which is on a terraformed planet where spiders develop intelligence and create a spider society. The other follows humans on a generation ship as they try to find a new planet for them to live on. This is a book where I enjoyed the first 2/3, but I loved the final third. I think the way that Tchaikovsky brings these storylines together, tying up all of the plot elements as well as the themes, was masterfully done. It was something that I enjoyed both on a technical level, I liked the harder sci-fi elements, but it was something that really resonated with me personally and something that I still think about a lot several years after having finished reading it. I hope this has the same kind of impact on you as it did me. Moving on to sci-fi books between 700 and 800 pages, my top 3 picks were Dune, the classic sci-fantasy space opera from Frank Herbert, Ilium by Dan Simmons, where the Iliad takes place on Mars, and number 1, Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rocchio, book 6 in the Sun Eater series, which is his sci-fantasy Sword and Planet space opera. I don't think it's a coincidence that each of these 3 books are part of a series, as well as being sci-fantasy, as I think books of this length are more common within that subgenre. Anyway, I won't talk too much about Disquiet Gods specifically, seeing as it is book 6 in the series. But in general, Sun Eater is the story of Hadrian Marlowe, as he recounts his story about how he would destroy a sun, wiping out an entire alien species. And in some people's eyes, this made him a hero, whereas in others, he was a monster. And we have to go on this journey with him in order to try and find out and make that decision for ourselves. This series combines epic world building, beautiful prose, intense action scenes, interesting character development, as well as some hard-hitting philosophy. I think it's pretty much everything that you could want in a space opera series, and I can't wait for the 7th and final book, which is coming out this November. And now for our final category, The True Doorstoppers, Sci-fi books over 800 pages long. My top 3 picks were Pandora's Star, the first book in the Commonwealth duology, a highly descripted space opera from Peter F. Hamilton. Demon in White, the third book in the Sun Eater series from Christopher Rocchio. And number 1, The Dark Tower, the final book in the Dark Tower from Stephen King, which combines the genres of Western, romance, horror, fantasy, and science fiction. The Dark Tower series follows the gunslinger Roland Deschain, as well as his quartet, as they travel through various portals, various worlds, in order to reach the Dark Tower. Now, the 7th and final book in the Dark Tower series is a bit of a controversial one amongst fans because it does include some rather ambitious meta elements and some of the narrative threads end rather quickly. Now, neither of these two things bothered me that much, but even if they did, I would still love this book because of the high points. I cried at least 3 times reading this book. I was just left an emotional wreck. And I think the ending to this book is absolutely perfect. I loved what Stephen King did with The Dark Tower. So there you go. Those are some of my favorite sci-fi books, starting at between 100 and 200 pages, going all the way up to over 800 pages. I will admit that even though I'm a pretty big reader, sometimes I do put off some of those big books on my schedule, but I do try to read at least one massive chunker per year, and one that I have coming up on my schedule is 11/22/63, also by Stephen King. So if you've read that one, sounds like a great time travel story. Let me know if you think I'm going to enjoy that one as much as I did The Dark Tower. And just before we go, it's time to spin the quantum wheel, where all of the patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner. Let's find out what I'll be reading in the month of July. How long will it be? A shorty, a longie, somewhere in between, and will it become one of my favorites? Looks like Aurora Rising, or will the tick go to... No, it stays on Aurora Rising by Alistair Reynolds. Oh, good video for Alistair Reynolds. He's got a couple of shout outs already. And now we're going back to the Revelation Space universe, but it is a kind of a prequel, kind of somewhat of a standalone, I believe, set before the events of a Revelation Space. So if you like space opera, if you like detective stories, I think Aurora Rising might be for you, and join me, read it in July. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash or just gently click the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima, A New Eden, Half Ogre, Zakawe, Samil, and the Infinite Colin. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.